moving on to segment number 2. Joshua, why don't you tell us about your segment?
So I think, for a lot of people, track IR head tracking is a pretty obvious one. Something that some people may not consider is why you'd want to use a joystick or a HOTAS when you're flying. And I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I think today we're going to get a little bit more specific and give some pretty detailed reasons that you may want to consider. I'm going to start though with a story. And this story goes back actually about 7, 8 years now. I started flying Arma or just kind of any cooperative game because I like teamwork and I wanted to do something fun and, just kind of was a good distraction from normal daily stress. And I got into a group and started working with Jay and some other folks as a air asset. And they'd be communicating with me, but I would not be immediately communicating back with them. And the problem was I had my push to talk set up for our VoIP program on my keyboard, and I was trying to fly with my hands on the throttle and stick. So I wasn't taking advantage of all of the capabilities that you can do with the joystick. And it was just one of those moments where you realize when you're flying on your own or you're doing your own sort of program, which I had done before this, then you start working with a group, there becomes different requirements and you start understanding why a HOTAS was designed the way it was and how you can maximize it. So in essence, we're going to take all the experience I've learned in the last 7, 8 years doing those kinds of things and going into the profiles that I've posted. And Joni's going to post a link for both of them. They've been posted on Spectrum. There is both a Thrustmaster T16000
I'll get
and
the
the
links to chat.
Thrustmaster HOTAS Warthog. Um, they've been up in Spectrum. One of them's been up for a week. The other one was just posted today. So I hope people can look at those. You can look at the design here, and it's a systems-based approach that we're going to talk about. And one of the first things I want to get into is Jay has some requirements that he insists on for a design or for being able to fly and move, shoot, communicate in a way that's going to let you be effective. So I'm going to let Jay talk about that before we move on.
Well, I think the key thing there, and I want to reiterate, you don't understand how frustrating it was playing Arma with Josh before he figured out how to put a PTT on his HOTAS. We would routinely scream at him in the radios to do something, and then he would just ignore us and not answer and confirm that he heard us. And it generally stressed us out a great deal to the point that we'd start shooting at him sometimes. But I
We
have
got
3 rules.
we're still married.
We're still married, yes. So I have 3 rules that I was taught, and what a lot of guys don't know is there was a excuse me, there was a virtual fighter wing that I was a part of. They had a very good training course there, and one of the guys that was my primary instructor was also an instructor for the U.S. Navy and actually was an instructor pilot teaching carrier landing, the portion that teaches carrier landings. And so, I got a lot of really good training, and he really kind of gave me this philosophy. It's really simple. It's, there's 3 steps to it. Step number 1 is from the instant you enter combat until the instant you leave combat, you have to have control of all of your flight controls simultaneously. Thank you, Mushroom Tiger, for the follow. You've got to be able to not only yaw, pitch, and roll, but you also, in our environment, need to be able to strafe and do all of those things at the exact same instant. Number 2 is, while doing number 1, you need to be able to also access all of your combat systems. You need to be able to lock weapons, fire missiles, shoot guns, target things in the radar and all of that jazz. And then finally, number 3 is that while doing number 1 and doing number 2, for some odd reason, when you start shooting at people, they don't like to sit still. They try to get out of the way of the bullets you're firing at them. And so you need some ability to be able to visually track targets to continue to stay on them off axes, i.e. track IR, Toby, some type of mouse mouse control or something on your joystick that allows you to look. What we found was that if you took two pilots of the same skill and you had one pilot that wasn't following any of the rules and one pilot that was, the pilot that was would see about an 85% kill rate against the pilot that wasn't. So every time you take, you're not doing those three things, puts you at this really great disadvantage. It doesn't mean that you can't overcome it with sheer skill, but it means that somebody that has the same level of skill as you is going to beat you a lot of the time versus very few times for you. And that's kind of my philosophy. And I think Jolly, you would agree that that's a very similar philosophy from the Air Force perspective as well for flying combat aircraft.
For real life, yes. But I will say not everything in real life carries over to a computer game.
Completely agree. But it's a good rule of thumb.
Oh, yeah.
So there are my three rules, Josh, now that I have thrown those out there.
Well, and I think those things, at least for me, when I have a systems oriented design and I feel like when I'm using a joystick, I can access more things quickly. And because you're using a lot of four-way hat switches, those hat switches are assigned to a specific type of system. So for offensive combat, for defensive combat, um, for communications, whatever. And when you do that, it really helps for me with time compression and task saturation. Again, if you're flying by yourself or with a couple of people, it's not always going to hit so hard, but you're trying to communicate with guys on the ground. You're trying to protect yourself. You've got other assets you're trying to not collide with. And so things can add up really quick, especially if you start getting close to the ground or into combat. And, as more and more things require your attention, the simpler something is, the more systems oriented it's been, the more you can do Jay's things and the more you can help fight that sort of curve of information that's coming at you and be ahead of it. And that I think helps with situational awareness, with comfort. And when I couldn't communicate, I know for me, even back in armor, it was frustrating. And I'm trying to think about all the things I got to do, take my hand off, try to reach over, touch a key. And it's just one more thought I had in my head. So all this stuff just makes it simpler and easier for me personally. So I don't know if anyone else has experienced that at all, where they've had some frustrations using a mouse and keyboard where they couldn't do what they wanted to do.
It
Nobody?
does. Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I don't think I would ever do this game with a mouse and keyboard. I just can't see it. I started really my simulations on Elite Dangerous, and Elite Dangerous is one of those games that is very keybind oriented, and I bought my HOTAS setup for that and got used to using it and would never go back. Star Citizen, I think it's pretty much to me the same way. Although I do know people, we fly with them all the time that do mouse and keyboard. They fly mainly big ships, big slower ships. You can do that effectively, I believe, and I think you could probably do fighters effectively too if you have the practice and have the skill. For me personally, I could never be able to do that. I don't think I can adjust. I know I can't adjust, me personally, the throttle, the speed, get the fine tuning that you need without having the HOTAS and throttle set up.
Well, interestingly enough, one of our pilots who does a lot of the org ops, he recently had an issue with his throttle, and he uses the Warthog, so he's using one of my profiles. And so he had to fly the last org op that we do with 40 or 50 people, and he couldn't use the profile. He had to use his mouse, and we were discussing it today because I thought this was a good chance to get a perspective of going the other way, because I would never do it unless I was forced. And he says, I can do almost everything, but I can't do it as well, and I don't enjoy it as much, right? So, we're talking about a sort of a bell curve of ability. And like most bell curves, most people in the center are probably going to benefit from a HOTAS that's, designed well and set up right. And there's going to be outliers who can probably do miracles with a mouse and keyboard. But for that granular precision and not having this all on, all off mentality, I think it makes a huge difference. Even just being able to land or pick a landing spot when you're off of a landing pad, I feel like I have a lot more control, and I feel like the muscle memory kind of things kick in. And again, I can start thinking about what I'm doing as opposed to worry about how I'm doing it. So for me, that's a very big thing for myself.
Yeah, and where I've been reluctant is taking it to that next level, Josh, which is what your profiles are doing. It's going from having one button do one task, which is what Turin has, because Turin's a simple dude. So one button, one task, and I still have to use my keyboard for certain things. It's going to that next level, which is using that mod button to then use another key to do another function. So that will be my next challenge, and
Yeah.
you'll get me there, but it'll take a while.
So for anyone who doesn't know, every button on my profile does two things. There's the primary state, then there's a modifier that you hold down. And when you hold the modifier down, pushing the same button again does a second function. So this way, every four-way hat switch actually gives you 8 different things you can do. So you really can increase the number of things. And with as much mud as Star Citizen's throwing against the wall because they're not systems oriented, they just keep adding an ever increasing number of buttons. It certainly helps, and it makes it nicer so that you can really get into different systems. And I even adapted this one for burst size changes for the countermeasures. I'm not sure how necessary that is, but we're going to try it out at least as an experiment on this version of the profile.
Yeah, I mean, as the king of mod states, using SATOC and Logitech joysticks with multiple modes, I don't know how anyone does it without that. The truth is that once you get, it's really easy to get used to shift states or mod states.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's more immersive to me. Like I get lost in some moment and feel like I'm actually flying. I don't think I'd be possible using a mouse and keyboard. Not for me.
No, the mouse and keyboard. I mean, the HOTAS setup is more intuitive. I mean, you do feel like you're actually operating the spacecraft, aircraft, whatever you want to call it, the way you're supposed to. I think my hangup has been when I went through trying to use the target software the first time around. For whatever reason, I either didn't set it up correctly or I wasn't using it correctly. It just redid all my keybinds, and I was very rage quit frustrated that that I had to do that. So I think if what you've got out there, Josh, is a very good first step for people like me who can look at it, and try to follow along and set it up. So um, maybe I'll do it. I'll just have to see.
Well, I did make for both the T16,000 and the Warthog. I did make installation videos. I can't say that they are the most
Right.
exciting things you've ever listened to, but as my wife pointed out, she said they're relatively clear and I get to the point and help walk you through. I mean, I've also made an installation guide that's like 14 pages long, because Star Citizen isn't making it easy to do some of these things, but the videos help as well to get that in there. And then there's a design concept video that kind of covers both. So I'm hoping that helps, to see, people use it more, but it's a little bit technical and it's a little bit of a pain, but once you get used to it a couple times, it's pretty quick.
Nom, any thoughts on HOTAS profiles and whether you like them or hate them?
I'm all on board with the HOTAS. I have not yet gotten used to the idea of doing a mod state thing. I've messed with that in the past. It's just something I can't get used to. I got pretty much all the controls on my X56 in use. I've gotten muscle memory down pretty good for those. Got it where I like it. I don't have a particular need, but I don't get big into the combat aspects of it though. So I don't have
That's
a
true.
particular need for the mod states. It, uh, but yeah, it's like I'm all on board with that. I mean, it's a matter of the learning curve. You can get somebody in the game quick using mouse and keyboard, than quicker than you could if they're having to use a HOTAS.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
but you hit a ceiling of what you can, for most people anyway. I think you hit a ceiling of what you're capable of with a mouse and keyboard. Whereas there's a lot more potential when you're using a HOTAS, and you do feel like you have a lot more control. Just being able to have that analog rather than just on off, having the analog control for strafing when you're landing or making fine movements over an area. Um,
Throttle up,
it's
throttle down.
invaluable, and track IR as well.
So you can look at the things.
Right, situational awareness, and that's the thing is most of the time one of the reasons I didn't really buy into track IR until about a year or so ago is most of the time I hear track IR, I'm thinking about it from a combat point of view, but I use it
It's
more
not.
for mining than anything really right now. It's great for being able to look around, do a ping, and you're able to quickly glance around and see where that box is you picked up, and see where that blue
Instead
box
of having
is.
to constantly do crazy Ivans.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I see a
that
ping.
prospector
Let's-
prospector does not like to turn on a dime.
I see a ping. Let's start a right-hand turn and turn 290 degrees until I get to it.
Mhm.
Jolly, what are your thoughts on HOTAS profiles before we move on? I know this is a subject we've covered a little bit, but
Yeah,
Josh
my
has
main
done a
point
pretty
is,
good job building some.
I cannot play a flight simulator game without a HOTAS, period. You
Yeah.
can't play DCS with it. You can't even do Microsoft Flight Sim unless you have a HOTAS itself. Star Citizen is not a flight simulator.
That's true.
And so you can play a keyboard. Well, no, you can't play keyboard and mouse. If you have a standard 5-button mouse and a keyboard, you're in for one hell of a lot of trouble. If you have a multi-button mouse and a keypad, programmable keypad, you can do okay with it, no problems. But I would say, and we've said this before, you said it yourself, Jay, you fly whatever you're most comfortable with, where that may
Yep.
be. And Turn brings up super good points about memorizing, especially the modifiers. Now I've got a double one. I got to memorize what does what. That holds true. I will also point out, especially the 16,000, a lot of those hats, it's not very clear. Am I going up or am I going left? There's not a good break point in those things at all. Maybe the Warthog's a lot better, but the 16,000 is not. The other thing to keep in mind is a lot of the functions you really don't need to have on the HOTAS. I mean, do you really need it for dropping your gear? Just take your left hand off, hit the N key, and put your left hand back on, and press off of that. So prioritize what keys you're going to be using there. Memorize those first, and let the lesser ones, the non-combat ones, go to the secondary stage later on in life.
Yep. I think largely when we get down to it that a HOTAS with some type of touch screen mounted near your throttle quadrant is going to be the optimal thing for 90% of this. Because there's a lot of stuff like switching to mining mode or switching to scanning mode and things like that that you probably don't need for a lot of pilots. Some fighter pilots maybe, but for a lot of pilots, they don't need on their HOTAS. They just really need the ability to control flight surfaces, lock targets, and, fire missiles and make the guns go boom.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. I mean, I really could probably benefit from just an 8-button box that I could just push a button to do some things without having to also look down at my keyboard and pick the button that I need to push. If it's really close to my my throttle, I could just reach over by muscle memory and click the button that I need to click. Sort of like a Twitch deck or whatever you call those things that have
Stream Deck.
Stream Deck,
would
yeah,
work.
something like that you can even put the icons in if you wanted to to go fancy like that. And
You should talk to
such.
me. We've got something that I can show you that we have.
Yeah,
Wink,
so
wink, nod, nod.
because
that we've been working
I'm
off.
more along the lines of Namidius. I don't I fly big ships, I cargo exploration. I don't do a lot of mining, but I have been doing a little bit more combat lately because right now that's where the focus is and some of the game loops that they're trying to test within the latest build. But again, for me, as long as I can roll, pitch, and lock and fire, then you're pretty much done what Turin's able to do. So you've flown with me, Jay. I can fly the ship pretty well, but
You fly the ship excellently.
I'm not so sure that I could really get in there and do what you need to do from a a fighter wing standpoint. But willing to learn.
Well, I think I'd like to
Tara?
end on this. Mushroom Tiger says, with the profiles available, the HOTAS is much more appealing to a lot more people. That was the whole goal. Yeah, I mean, I did it for myself. There's no question, but I did the T16000 as because it was something I could control a little bit more. And I'm used to the software, but that was my hope, was that more people could see and get through with it. Unfortunately, Star Citizen has things so goofy that if you plug in a joystick right now, jump in game and you bind the axes, you push the throttle forward, you're actually going to go backwards. And so it's not set up to be friendly right now for HOTAS for a lot of people, and it's a pain. I mean, my install videos are 8 and 10 minutes long, and that's just the video. It's going to probably actually take you a little bit longer to go through all those steps. So my hope is just simply that people will enjoy them, learn from them, and give some feedback, and maybe we can get Star Citizen to make them a little bit easier to install.
Yep. Terrafon brought up Game Glass. I strongly discourage the use of Game Glass. There should be no reason that your software wants to communicate with a third-party server constantly between with your setup. I would strongly urge you not to use. Oh, Terrafon, it definitely does. Let me tell you, we've packet sniffed it. It's definitely talking to a third-party server all the time, constantly.
Cole brought up voice attack, and I've used voice attack in Elite Dangerous, and it's got a lot of uses there. I haven't used it for Star Citizen only because with our involvement in operations, when you're using your own communication system, talking to your fellow org mates and op mates, I find it, I could probably make a mistake and start talking in voice. It's sort of like having a Siri or an Alexa. It's going to start working for you, you like it or not. I'd push the wrong button. So, and I apologize to all the Alexas out there that just went off and said what, but I think voice attack does have its use, but I also think it can be a crutch if you need to learn the systems, and I'm sure most people do who use it. They just like the immersion with it, and something talking back to you when you're playing by yourself. Which Elite you can do more solo than you really do in Star Citizen. Star Citizen's designed as a group team play game, really.
Yep. Well, and I think the thing to keep in mind here is that voice commands are always going to be slower than keyboard presses or tablet presses or something of that nature. So I mean, I would go with a tablet solution or a Stream Deck solution before I would go with a voice attack. And I can't tell you the number of times when we were flying F-16s in BMS that it seemed like every last person that tried voice attack at some point would rip their landing gear off because they would come down at inopportune moments and overspeed and damage the bird. So, yeah, I don't recommend voice attack. It's slow compared to button presses. So